Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. Phantom Nightmare is the set that just keeps on giving. We've got U-Bell support, Raid Raptor support, goblins, and now we're continuing the proud tradition of janky ritual monsters that are references to past janky ritual monsters. Sadly, it's not Crab Turtle or Chakra. In fact, as far as jank goes, things are pretty tame here. But trust me, it does have a spin I'm very happy to finally see roped in. Premiering in the Tournament Pack second season all the way back in October of 2002, Skull Guardian is an unassuming, non-effect ritual monster like many others of its ilk. Its ritual spell, Novox's Prayer, is completely disjointed from the monster it summons, and we all just kind of accepted that back in the old Wild West days of Yu-Gi-Oh! You could get away with anything back then. But this is the era of continuity, and nothing can be left on the cutting room floor. So the designers dragged him out of their dusty old storage bins, hit him with a little bit of that 2.0 re-debut treatment, and even gave him some friends. Remember Saphira and Saravis, those light ritual dragon monsters that didn't really have a theme to call their own? Well, they put Novox on Sprite's Blessing as a reference, and now that reference is ascended and ancient. So let's round up our new band of divine figures, see how these fresh faces work in tandem, and most importantly, keep it down. This is a place of worship, for crying out loud. This is Silenforce Explained. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons and the fine people over at Dragon Shield. If you want to protect your cards with the strongest scales on the market that even come with their own lore while supporting the channel, use my affiliate link in the description. So, what's the deal with Silenforce? Well, they're a series of light attribute monsters of various types, primarily warrior and dragon. But what in the heck is up with the name? Well, would you believe me if I said that it's another pun based in Japanese? From what I can gather, the Japanese name of the archetype is Shukase, which means regulation, so that's where the enforcing part comes in. It has two kanji, with the first character meaning solemn or quiet, with the second character being replaced for one that represents voice. So they regulate sound, they're silent forcers. There's also the fact that vox in Latin is voice, so if you take a look at Novox, you might start to see the picture here. Like many ritual decks, there's an emphasis on assembling the spells and materials, and there's a lot of redundancy in that regard over here. Our main goal is to summon a gigantic monster with strong protections that comes with an Omni-Negate, bolstered by a robust advantage engine, gearing you up for the moment you steamroll your opponent. And all of that hinges on one devoted devotee. Novox, the Silenforcer disciple, is a level 1 fairy monster with 50 attack and 2050 defense. God, I love Yu-Gi-Oh! If you would ritual summon exactly one light warrior or dragon ritual monster with a card effect that requires the use of monsters, this card can be used as the entire tribute. And if this card is normal or special summoned, you can place a Silenforce continuous spell or trap card from your deck face up in your spell and trap zone, and if any number of light warrior or dragon ritual monsters are special summoned to your field while this card is in your grave, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card. Oh, wow! Yeah, this card is pretty heinous. So we're getting a free continuous card into play whenever you summon them, and our options so far are hella nice. They count as the entire tribute for those ritual summons, and because it gets sent to the grave, then the ritual monster is summoned, you just get Novox right back. It's like the ritual summon was free, which, to be fair, does seem to be a requirement for competent ritual themes nowadays. And trust me, once we get to the big bad boss, you'll see why the revive is gonna be a problem. At least for the opponent. Just know that for now, big things come in small attack stats. Seriously, 50? Someone was having a real ball during the development period here. Saphira, the wise Silenforcer queen, is a level 6 dragon monster with 2500 attack and 2400 defense, and you can discard this card to send a ritual spell from your deck to the grave. Then you can add a light warrior or dragon ritual monster from your deck or grave to your hand. You can also banish this card from your grave to ritual summon a light warrior or dragon ritual monster from your hand by tributing monsters from your hand or field whose total levels equal or exceed the level of the ritual monster you ritual summon. So it's like a strange pre-preparations that bends the spell, and we've got a couple of good grave effects among them. And even if they didn't, having a ritual spell in grave means more value off of a regular preparation of rites. And don't worry, just because we didn't add that to hand with its own effect doesn't mean we can't ritual summon, because Saphira itself is a ritual effect. This radiant figure is a powerful bridge from one end of our ritual lines to another, but we have got to get this lady some shoes. You're not in dragon form right now, Saphira, and this is the internet. You cannot trust these people. Soravis, the sagely Silenforcer dragon, is a level 7 dragon monster with 2600 attack and 2800 defense, and you can special summon this card from your hand by shuffling 2 spells from your hand and or grave into the deck, including at least 1 ritual spell, and you can only special summon this Soravis once per turn this way. When your opponent activates a card or effect, as a quick effect, you can return this card to the hand to special summon a light warrior or dragon ritual monster from your hand or deck, but shuffle it into the deck during the end phase of the next turn. Oh, so we're just gonna keep summoning ritual monsters without ignoring summoning conditions, huh? Wasn't just a N.O.V.A's thing, huh? Okay. But my misgivings over problem-solving card text aside, this is a pretty baller effect. More often than not, the monster you're gonna summon is Soravis' ritual form. And while it's seen a fair share of success as an anti-targeting hand trap on the field, it's a way to stop inherent special summonings while banishing the monsters, so it's a pretty great piece of interaction. And since Silenforce Soravis goes back to the hand to accomplish this, you can do this turn after turn so long as you have rituals to summon and spells to recycle. It's a solid monster with great interaction and recursion, and I love the grumpy Jedi look that Soravis is going on in their human form. Never thought they'd be a Digimon fan, but you learn something new every day. Alright, that covers our main deck monsters. Now it's time for those rituals, which means we're roping in the original ritual versions of our Silenforcing friends. First is Saphira, Queen of the Dragons, a level 6 dragon ritual monster with 2500 attack and 2400 defense, and you can ritual summon this card using Hymn of Light. The spell itself works like your usual ritual spell, but can be banished from grave to replace the destruction of any number of ritual monsters by battle or card effect. During the end phase, if this card was ritual summoned this turn, or if a light monster was sent from the hand or deck to the grave this turn while this card was face up on the field, you can activate one of these effects. Either draw 2 cards then discard a card, discard a random card from your opponent's hand, or add a light monster from your grave to your hand. Over the course of a long game, this can grind you out some amazing value, and it triggers off of both players' end phases, so if you can keep getting lights into the grave, you can accelerate through your deck, pick apart your opponent's hand, or just recover your yarded monsters. Sadly, I'm not sure how effective that's going to be in the context of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! But even just a single activation that gets you that draw effect means you're digging for hand traps or other interaction that you can use during your opponent's turn, so it's still worth playing a copy. A very nurturing effect on this one, but it makes sense considering that she is the mommy dragon. Eat your heart out, Blue Eyes Abyss Dragon. Soravis, the Ancient and Ascended, is a level 7 dragon ritual monster with 2600 attack and 2800 defense that can be ritual summoned with Sprite's Blessing, a ritual spell that can ritual summon any light ritual monster, but the levels do have to be exact. It's also how Novox got involved, and how we know this is tied into Duel Terminal lore. Thanks, Happy Lover! When your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a monster you control, as a quick effect, you can discard this card to negate the activation. And when your opponent would special summon any number of monsters, as a quick effect, you can return this card to the hand to negate the special summon, and if you do, banish those monsters. Yeah, this card is just phenomenal. It's gotten new life now thanks to the non-ritual version, because previously sinking all of the material into a ritual summon of a monster that was just going to stick around temporarily wasn't a big value proposition. But because it's searchable off of Preparation of Rites, it's actually been a pretty neat tech pick in just about any ritual deck as a way to stave off cards like Valor and Imperm as a hand trap. Honestly, it's pretty cool to see them back in the spotlight, as well as being given the opportunity to play at its full power. Now we just need to find a way to make a light retrain of Buford the Ninth. Then we can get the whole Weird Dragon Ritual squad together. Skull Guardian is a level 7 warrior ritual monster with 2050 attack and 2500 defense. You ritual summon it with Novox's Prayer, which is a pretty standard ritual spell. That's really all there is to this card. Technically there are cards that work with this, but hoo boy will they need a reprint if you actually need to play them. You know how I said this came out in a tournament pack in 2002? Yeah, that's the only printing it's had. And to be fair, no one was clamoring for a Skull Guardian reprint, but even Super Warline has had a second printing. Get with it, folks. Skull Guardian, the Silenforcing Protector, is a level 7 warrior ritual monster with 2050 attack and 2500 defense that can be ritual summoned with Silenforcing Prayer. And we'll save the info on that ritual spell for the next section. Mostly because we already have a lot to deal with right here. Cause it gains 2050 attack while Novox, the Silenforcer Disciple, is on your field or in your grave. If this card is ritual summoned, you can add a Silenforce monster or a warrior or dragon ritual monster from your deck to your hand, and while you control Novox, the Silenforcer Disciple, and your opponent activates a card or effect, as a quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Yeah, so this is one heck of a boss monster. Remember how I said that Novox's self-revival was no joke? This is why. You use them as the whole material for Skull Guardian, netting you a 4100 attack monster. You get to search another Silenforce monster because why not? And when Novox comes back using its own effect, your Omni-Negate is now online. And if your response to all this is, oh, that doesn't seem so bad, I'll just run over the Novox before committing to an effect, you hold on to that thought and see where it gets you. While not as splashy as rituals like Necroz of Trishula or Magician of Black Chaos Max, this new Skull Guardian is easily one of the strongest when it comes to the grind game. But I'm detecting a distinct lack of skulls. I know the original name is Law Guardian, but they ain't gonna call it that in the TCG. Where are my skulls? Alright, that's all of our monsters. Now it's time for the spells and traps. Silenforcing Prayer is a ritual spell card that can be used to ritual summon any light ritual monster by tributing light monsters from your hand or field whose total levels equal or exceed the level of the ritual monster you want to ritual summon. If any number of light ritual monsters you control leave the field by an opponent's card effect, except during the damage step, you can banish this card from your grave to special summon a Saravis, the Ancient and Ascended, Saphira, Queen of Dragons, or Skull Guardian, the Silenforcing Protector from your hand or deck. Ignoring summoning conditions? Oh, come on! Why are we even using that terminology here and not in other effects? Ugh! This is our backup ritual effect, with the primary being Silenforce Saphira. This is actually a really good spell to send to grave with her effect, giving your light rituals effectively a floating effect so you can maintain your board presence. And I suppose it also allows you to tech in any light ritual monster in here outside of the usual warriors and dragons. But I'm gonna leave that theory crafting up to all the lovely brewers out there to figure out. Mostly because I just want to ignore that this card exists, because it makes me so angry! Hello everyone, post-recording Nova here, and I wanted to do a follow-up to this whole spiel about ignoring summoning conditions. I came to a realization that I feel pretty silly I didn't think of beforehand, and since I've been spreading it, I figured I should own up to it here so I can correct it, or maybe you didn't know about it and we can all learn a thing or two. So there's actually precedent for summoning monsters of particular card types without saying ignoring summoning conditions. A big example is Metaltron 12, the True Drake Combatant. If destroyed by an opponent's card, you can special summon a Fusion, Synchro, or Xyz monster from your extra deck. It doesn't say it ignores summoning conditions, and yeah, you just don't have to. You only have to do that when there's some other rider on the card. Famously, Elemental Heroes have this card must be fusion summoned printed on all of them. So that's why every card that just summons them out of the extra deck has to also add ignoring summoning conditions, because otherwise just saying summon an Elemental Hero fusion monster from the extra deck isn't going to cut it. And I never made the connection that that same thing happens with rituals. Now, there are some situations where you would have to use that, namely the Silenforcing Prayer card notes Saravis, Saphira, and the new Skull Guardian specifically, so it says ignoring summoning conditions, which can be used to summon monsters of particular card types when you wouldn't otherwise be able to, but it isn't necessary. They don't do it here because if they said a Saravis, Saphira, or Skull Guardian ritual monster, then they wouldn't be specifically named monsters, and that's a problem because they're specifically named so that they work with pre-preparation of rights. So that's the distinction. You can use ignoring summoning conditions, but you don't have to when the monster doesn't have any other summoning restrictions, though you do have to add it on there if it does, like Elemental Heroes, and all of that applies to rituals. So Novels work just fine. I'm just being a weird baby who didn't know anything. Hopefully you've learned something as I've learned something, and we can all put this behind us and we can treat this whole thing as being very, very normal. Thank you for dealing with the whole flow of the episode being interrupted. Let's get back to the video. Silenforcing Barrier is a continuous spell card, and while you control Novox, the Silenforcer Disciple, and a light ritual monster, your opponent's monsters can only target ritual monsters for attacks. Also, your opponent can't target light monsters with card effects. And during your main phase, you can add a Silenforce card or a Skull Guardian ritual monster from your deck to your hand, except a copy of this card. Hey, 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 hey! And this is where the payoff is. Remember that combo of Novox and Skull Guardian? This makes it even more difficult to interact with. When you have both on board and this, not only do they all ward off targeting effects, now you can't try to run over Novox to suppress the Omni-Negate, because now the only legal target to attack is a 4100 attack behemoth. And the cherry on top? Barrier and Novox search each other, so good luck dealing with that. Still only ends up being the second most annoying barrier card out there though. I'm looking at you, Dimensional. Silenforcing Authority is a continuous trap card, and during any main phase, you can activate one of these effects. Either shuffle a Light Warrior or Dragon Ritual monster or ritual spell card from your hand or grave into the deck, and if you do, take a Silenforce monster from your deck and either add it to your hand or special summon it, or target cards your opponent controls up to the number of Light Warrior and Dragon Ritual monsters you control, and destroy both them and this card. So you get your choice of either a recovery effect that also tutors out an on-theme monster, or is potentially a massive amount of spot removal. Once again, a pretty strong effect to leverage in a control-style deck. It keeps your resources topped off, and in a pinch, you can trade it in as a way to deal with your opponent's setup. But you might want to take this up with Solemn Johnson. They've already staked a claim on the whole authority thing, and if I know one thing, it's that he does not like anyone stepping on his toes. Alright, now that you know all the cards, here's a little combo you'll want to keep in mind when you play the deck. And all it takes to pull off is a single copy of Novox, the Silenforcer Disciple. And deceptively, we've got a lot more than 3 copies of it. You could play 1-for-1, tribute off Diviner of the Herald, or even tribute off Cyber Angel Benten. There are a lot of ways to get to our monk, though we do want to avoid using Barrier. That's because when we summon Novox, we'll use it to place Silenforcing Barrier onto the board, using its search effect to get us Silenforcer Saphira. Discard that Saphira, sending either Silenforcing Prayer for a float or Hymn of Light for protection from deck to grave, adding Silenforcing Skull Guardian from deck to hand. Then, use the Saphira effect in grave to ritual summon that Skull Guardian, tributing the Novox as the entire material, who will then return to field. From this point, you can use the new Skull Guardian search effect to grab you any on-theme monster, or a Warrior or Dragon Ritual monster. At this point, you have the Skull Guardian and Novox on board, representing a huge monster with an Omni Negate, the barrier that protects both of them from targeting and Novox from battle, 4 other cards in hand, as well as the search target off of Skull Guardian. So if at any point you play another spell that goes to the graveyard, you could use that search to get Silenforce Seravis, summon it to the field by shuffling those spells back into your deck, and now it's a Ritual Seravis waiting to happen that can stop inherent special summons. Alright, so that's all the Silenforce cards, but what do we do with them? Well, while we do have a lot of high attack monsters, OTKing doesn't really seem like our style. We're much more comfortable trying to go first, setting up a lot of protection, then ending the game on the crackback with our bolstered resources and entrenched positions. So we're gonna need cards that keep our advantage high, ensure our disruptive board, and find cards that make the most of our Light Dragon and Warrior ritual synergies. So what can we play to help them out? As far as that pool goes, it's pretty shallow. Ignoring what we've already covered, we have Kukulane, which isn't going to find much help without any normal monsters to play off of, the Paladins of White and Photon Dragon in case we want to extend the invitation to Blue and Galaxy Eyes, and probably the most playable, Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Dragon. It represents a spell negate, an Odd Eyes summon, and a ritual search. But since Silenforce Skull Guardian can search any warrior or dragon ritual monster, we've got even more splashing we can do. It's a larger pool than I thought, including Blackluster Soldier cards and the Novels, but my focus would be on the Necros. Both Clausulus and Brionac are warriors, and they both search you other cards. While they'll need to access their own deck's resources to actually ritual summon them, I wouldn't be surprised to see a Silenforce Necros list pop up. Honorable mentions go to Litmus Doom Swordsman because while Silenforce Authority is out, it's a 3000 attack monster, and Litmus Doom Ritual has a pretty neat draw effect, and Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon because double piercing battle damage is still nothing to mess around with. Rituals tend to lean on either one of 2 archetypes to boost their power, and because Novox special summons itself a lot and can be normal summoned, that rules out Drytron. So if you need some help searching and recovering your ritual spells and monsters, Incantations are the way to go. It's especially good if you want to splash other ritual themes in, because not only will they help you pair up the right monsters with the right spells, Incantation Inception can ritual summon any ritual monster, so it's great for enabling those monsters in a pinch. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the usual ritual staples. Preparation of Rites gets you a wide variety of ritual monsters, including all our on-theme ones, while recycling our ritual spells. And pre-prep also helps you because Silenforcing Prayer name drops no less than 3 specific ritual monsters. Cyber Angel Benten is the best material we contribute for Saphira, getting us either another copy of Benten to give us more fodder, or Novox. But another card that works wonders for us specifically is Ritual Sanctuary. Pitching a spell gets us any of our ritual monsters, because they're all light, or a ritual spell from our deck. Then, if Novox ever ends up stranded in the graveyard, all you have to do is shuffle a single spell from our grave back into our deck to bring it back. Mind you, of the 10,000 hands is here in case you get desperate, but if you want to get really sick with it, Choju of the Trillion Hands can get you both a ritual and a spell card. Just make sure you have a way to special summon it, because tribute summoning this level 6 monster might be a little pricey. As for a silly tech pick, Phantom Nightmare also ended up giving us a piece of support that works with Guardian cards that cannot be normal summoned or set, and Skull Guardian is certainly one of those. Principug can give Skull Guardian a second attack, and while in the grave, can use its effect to either recover Skull Guardian, or Novox, or Silenforcing Prayer, since those cards are mentioned on Skull Guardian's text. Sorry, Gate Guardian, we love that pug more. Alright, so that's all the info I have on Silenforce, but how does it measure up against the Nova scale? Novelty. Oh no. So, I'm raking my brain for reasons this deck is unique, but I'm kinda coming up blank. The big control ritual thing was done already with Nekroz and arguably Shinobirds, and even the reference to older forgotten ritual monsters was done way better and more mimetically by Novels. The inclusion of Saphira and Saravis is pretty funny, but isn't much more than committing to the bit setup in Sprite's Blessing, so I think Silenforce gets a 1 in novelty. Oh no. Objectivity. I'm gonna be honest, I'm scared of what this deck pulls off with one card. Granted, there are answers to it, but the investment is so low it hardly does anything to the deck's momentum, even if you do manage to push through it. This might be another instance of early evaluation, over-expecting from what the cards can do, but I've got a gut feeling and I'm going with it, so I'm giving Silenforce a 3 in objectivity. Versatility. Because of how broad the general support is, many ritual decks do end up splashing with each other. The only question is, how far do the particular synergies go together? In regards to Silenforce, it's pretty rough. Like we mentioned earlier, the Light Warrior and Dragon Ritual pool is pretty slim, so if the theme gets splashed into anything, it's not going to be in bits and pieces. Some decks may find value in what amounts to a free Omni-Negate plus a huge monster off of a modest main deck commitment, so I'm thinking a 3 in versatility is warranted here. Awesomeness. Despite my misgivings, this deck rules. I am a sucker for these reference archetypes, and seeing how they get re-envisioned for a new age of the game is always a treat. I'd also be lying if I didn't say that seeing Saravis and Saphira finally get involved in an honest-to-goodness deck is pure bliss, so they get a 5 in awesomeness, resulting in an overall 12 on the Nova scale. And that's all I have to say about Silenforce. The theme already has a bright future ahead of it, and that's before we even see any follow-up support that the theme is bound to get. Play your cards right, and you'll have a squadron of holy knights and dragons at your beck and call, ready to rain punishment down upon the wicked. Then, when you stand victorious over your enemies, you'll have your moment of Silenforce. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are they Silenforce but deadly, or are they not quite what you expected? And which one's your favorite? Look, I'm not gonna lie, Silenforce Skull Guardian looks rad as hell, but I'm here for the new Saphira. I'm barking. Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please be sure to like the video, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales that also come with their own lore while saving 5% on your order. Just make sure to use code GoldenNova at checkout. Today's episode is also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including the illustrious Quasar Commanders Frankie and Marluxia as a Girl, Nebula Navigators 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Andrew Newman, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Danny Bound, Dark Dragon X830, Eric, Aaron the Worldbreaker, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Great Big Pillock, Hair Bear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Hydrocraft 135, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Mega Combi, Millennia Asta, Molly Renata, Muzuki Clark, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Sir-Knight JCB, Skybuster Leo, The Wizard Moose, URTV 667 and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Alpha Sly, Almento 5010, A Random Pup, Ariel Kersey, Beluga Masta, Blue Gem, Borger with the Shotgun, Chaz Ghost, Corbinisms, Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Emony, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Howling Zangetsu, Herbal D, Inblink, Gesture Design, Kale the Dragon, Carp, Keyvon Public, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Matt Simmons, Michael Shimabukuro, Mustafa Aiden, Nitromo, Psycho Reaper Gaming, Shizuki Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, The Legendary Raven, Tucker Ordorn, Venusian Teapot, and Zeldreka, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey in covering all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits, and participate in monthly custom card reviews, I'd be super grateful if you'd consider checking out my Patreon in the description or joining as a YouTube member.